Steve Gillmor here. This is the Gillmor Gang. I'm supposed to stretch that out. What would you like me to say?
You can say the date, you can say the year, you can say how you're feeling.
The date, the year, and I feel great. Okay.
Wow.
Joining us from London, I believe, is Frank Radice. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Good to see you, Steve. Hello, gangsters. It's been a crazy week reading all of your stuff and seeing what's going on out there in the world for us to discuss tonight.
Okay.
Well, it is tonight for me.
I got that. From the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. Is that accurate?
No, we call them like subdivisions, whatever.
Okay. Brent Leary. Welcome, Brent.
Greetings and salutations from the great county of Henry.
Can you show us your hat?
Oh, yes. I'm in the midst of trying to wear a different Rams hat for every show I do until I run out of and have to wear a duplicate. So it's going to be a while before that happens. So, yeah.
So wait, you live in Henry?
We pronounce it Henry here in Georgia.
Yeah, we call it Houston here in London.
Well, there's a Houston, Georgia. There is a Vienna, Georgia, and there is another weird pronunciation of a
There's
national.
Houston streets in New York.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, it
No,
is.
it's south of Houston, not Houston.
Joining us from the Seattle, Washington area is Michael Markman.
How do you do? My background is a lie. It's overcast today. But I like the blue sky, so I'm keeping it.
It's
All
the
right.
little lie.
A little lie, yeah.
And look at that beautiful mountain. It's gorgeous.
What mountain is
The
that?
mountain is not visible today.
Is that Rainier or Everest or whatever?
That is, yeah, not Everest. No, it is Mount Rainier.
I knew it wasn't like Kilimanjaro. So.
No, it's not that either.
Just the snows of. And from Palo Alto, California, it's Keith Teare.
What a fantastic Friday this is to be with my buddies again, who inevitably will beat me up at some point during the next hour.
Okay, well, I'll start right now. So when you start making points that are, intellectually superior, the volume of your voice goes down, and I haven't got a loudness filter on your mic, so just keep that in mind. Speak up.
That would imply that I know when I'm being smart, which I don't.
I think that you probably think that that's usually true.
I do.
Yeah, me too. I think so.
I couldn't.
But I feel the same way about Denis and about Michael and about Brent and you too, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, I take that personally. And then the rounding up the rear, pardon the expression, is
Wow.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Yes, I have the broom. I'm following the elephants out of town.
what? And give up show business?
You know what? You know what? This was a really crappy week, and
That's why you're rounding out the rear, by the way.
I am. I'm not sure how stable I am for talking on the show today.
Why is that?
I will give it my best.
He's upset.
Why is it?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, while I'm padding, Keith, raise your volume, please.
Raise my volume. The only way I can do that is by pulling my microphone closer to my mouth like that.
That works.
That would be good.
Just take a deep breath. That'll raise your volume.
Okay, so Denis, I'm not sure I understand why you're so upset that you don't have anything to say. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm too upset. I'm so upset that I might say too much.
Okay, well, let me worry about that.
Okay, well, this is a week that really brought home for me. All of the big lies that we've been fed for decades now, whether it's Afghanistan or the economy. While I'm thinking of it, there's COVID. I think Greg Abbott should be arrested for crimes against humanity. Ron DeSantis too. I mean, I am taking names.
You're fed up. You're not taking it anymore.
You're not the only one.
I love that.
Believe it or
movie.
not, I am madder than hell.
Stick your head out the window and say that, and you got some.
I can't. The air conditioning's on.
All right. So we survived that emotional outburst, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I want to know is the Texas Supreme Court now the good guys?
Why? What did they do?
They're 1-1. They're batting 500.
What did they do?
Which isn't bad.
They
baseball.
rejected Abbott's ban on school mask mandates.
I love that the schools had come up with a great plan to just make the mask mandate a part of the dress codes. That seemed like a great alternative.
That was actually brilliant.
Yeah.
I think
Right there.
What
Thank you,
number?
Frank.
What
It was
number is that?
Three.
Number three.
It's part of number two, but
with a bullet.
Yeah.
Greg Abbott deserves a one-way ticket to The Hague.
You think? Oh
I
man.
think.
Steve,
Yeah,
your
get over
background
the
blur
COVID
means
first.
that whenever you hold anything up to the camera, it's blurred because it.
Yeah, that's part of my master plan.
It's that
brilliant.
that is a feature,
It could
not
be
a
saying
bug.
anything. It could say, "Go to Keith now."
It's brilliant.
You haven't spoken to Keith enough yet.
Ah,
So instead of more cowbell, it's like more Keith. Is that
Good.
Exactly. Does anybody know who the artist was who was in the cowbell sketch?
What?
It was
that
that
Sure.
was-
Artist?
yeah. that
or
was-
Christopher Walken? You mean? Or
That's
somebody
correct.
Ah,
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, the brother in the car scene in Annie Hall.
Oh
Might be
yeah,
going way-
I think that was Walken's first big impression on the movie going public. One short scene, one short monologue that left everybody shaken.
wow.
That's correct.
And the skit was on SNL?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, the cowbell skid.
That was
Famous.
major.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking about doing a meme with that. We need more Keith with a picture of Keith.
No,
I'm gonna do that and
Of
post it.
all of the instruments in the typical orchestra, I am proud to be associated with the cowbell. It's,
I would have thought you'd be good on the triangle too. It seemed to me that would be a good instrument as well.
Now,
Cymbals.
is that a nice thing to say, Frank?
Yeah, hey,
I still got it.
I can roll a boat. Kazoo. Anyway,
Kazoo.
Wow.
no,
Keep working.
it is a good thing to say. The
Take
triangle's
that
a
one
very,
to Philly,
it's a
please.
very important part of the orchestra. I have to, when we get around to talking about serious stuff, I do have something I want to talk about. So you just let me know, and I'll just sit back and be quiet for a while.
Let's see how long that takes.
Well, not very long. I just.
I
ahead,
took dinner. I
Go
took
ahead.
Dennis's anger for being, serious. But,
Oh, it was, but it got quickly moved off to cowbell, and so
You can't handle the cowbell.
this is a good show. Every one of these moments is a sneak peek.
you just ruined
I
it.
know.
That means none
Yeah,
of them
no,
are.
no.
In an alternate universe.
So I want to say something about Clarissa Ward, who on CNN, who has done one of the most amazing jobs I have ever seen by a war correspondent or a foreign correspondent in tough times. She has just beaten the competition left and right, and she's kicking ass and taking names. Dennis, she's doing it for you. And she was in some serious trouble the other day, and she just smoothly managed to get her way out of it and got a great story from it. And I just think that she's one of those people who needs to be remembered for the journalism that she did in the aftermath of the Taliban takeover in Kabul. And just amazing. And then the last report, which I found kind of disturbing, was that today no planes have taken off for America from Kabul, which is disturbing. And the other disturbing thing is why did they close Bagram? Anyway, those are my those things mean a lot to me.
Frank, had you ever spent any time there?
Not in Afghanistan, no. I tell you something interesting though. I don't know if any of you noticed on my newsletter or on my social media, I have been posting pictures of imagery of old events in history and events today. So the storming of the embassy in Tehran, and then images of the storming of the Capitol in Washington. So that was one of them. Another one was the insurrectionists inside the Capitol, and the Taliban inside one of the government buildings in Kabul. And the third one was, I can't even remember what it was. The reason that I got stuck on that one was because I got flamed badly by a couple of military guys whom I know, who spent a year sleeping on that base. And the issue with them was that I was showing images of these, he didn't say patriotic Americans, but he also didn't say that these people were insurrectionists versus, child killers and girl molesters. He made that point. And I said, to me, that is the Taliban in Kabul. And I made the point that I wanted to say, do we know yet that the new Taliban is the same as the old Taliban? But I think we do know that now. So I didn't say that. What I did say was it's about the imagery. It's about what the eye is seeing. And I had to point out to him that I had spent a number of years in war zones without a weapon. So I actually have a way of looking at these things through a lens that makes my opinion valid. And then all of a sudden, civilians started to jump on me. And I was so tempted to take it down, and then realized that taking it down would be cowardly on my part. Anyway, that's what I've been going through.
And where was it? Facebook?
Well, it was on Instagram was the one where I got some of the worst flames. But I had it on Instagram, Facebook. I put it in and I put it in the newsletter. And I was quite frankly, I was surprised, because the one that got the most negative response, my executive producer, the guy that was the producer of Nightline, the EP of Nightline back in the 80s, when the hostages were taken, he said that he felt, unfortunately, that they were apt comparisons. And those of us in the sort of the visual media, were looking at them for what they said visually. Now I understand that someone might be upset about that comparison. On the other hand, from a visual perspective, I couldn't get it. Anyway, that was what bothered me the most this week, other than the fact that, the Taliban took Kabul.
So what is history going to say about this week? 10 years from now, looking back at this week, what is the headline?
That the Twitter opened up the API to Spaces.
Yeah, that's gonna be what we remember.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a big deal, and I think anybody who was surprised by the speed with which the Afghani government dematerialized, I don't know why they would have been shocked by that. How many examples of nation building gone wrong have we seen over the years?
Well, the very concept of nation building misunderstands human beings.
Yeah.
Human beings don't allow themselves to be shaped from above for the most part. I mean, look at the crazes here in the US. that are anti-Biden. Imagine trying to nation build the US even is hard because people don't listen to stuff they don't agree with. And you know, so if you single out the minority and form a government from them, and expect, you know, history to suddenly disappear and all of the belief systems that preceded that moment to go away, that's never going to happen.
Well, I think it's more of an indictment of the media that there's such a surprise about this. I mean,
You know, yes, you're absolutely right. It is incumbent upon the media, and they were there. Richard Engel, who speaks Arabic, was there, and he, you know, I want to say he's been a real apologist, and I've always been a fan of this guy, but he's been a real apologist while he's been there. It's been on the side of the Taliban. But also he's been very anti-Biden, which I also find to be interesting because he's usually right down the middle and does a really good job, especially in Arab countries.
So there seems to be, what's interesting to me, Frank, is there seems to be a bipartisan consensus that the Taliban are the right people to do a deal with, going back to the Trump regime and now Biden. And now if you look at, despite all the scenes outside the airport, the relative lack of deaths and the fact that yesterday 6,000 people were evacuated, and what looks like cooperation between the US military and the Taliban to extricate whoever they want to extricate, more or less. So Steve's right. The media shows these guys with turbans and guns that are Muslims and want Sharia law. And there's almost kind of like an element of racism about it. Like these guys are outside the scope of normal human, you know, existence, when in fact they're not. They're quite normal. They're ordinary in a sense. It's just
I think ordinary is a better word, Keith.
Yeah.
I think you're asking the wrong question, though. Here's what I want to know. Why is it that we had to get out of Afghanistan and we've been in South Korea for 70 years?
Well, the first reason that we had to get out of Afghanistan when we did was because Trump made a deal with the Afghanis, with the Taliban. That's the reason. And I think, Steve, to answer your question, history will look back on this time and have that pin stuck in the board right away. I see what you're saying, Dennis. I totally get it. But in terms of getting out of Afghanistan, this was a Trump deal.
Well, it might have been a Trump deal. You might want to
look at Korea.
One at a time. One at a time. I can't hear either of you, Dennis and then Michael.
You might want to blame Trump and give him a black eye for it, but the job of whoever's sitting at the Resolute desk is to do things that make common sense. And if Trump's deal didn't make common sense, then what's the difference between welching on that deal and saying that Trump didn't have a clue about the virus or anything else? Trump was
but what about the fact that
Frank, I want to give Michael the space to finish what he said.
Well, I wanted to say that in the case of Korea, the opposing factions are divided into two geographic territories. So there is a Republic of Korea, and there's a People's Republic of Korea. And it's much easier for the U.S. to be there as a peacekeeper rather than an occupier. Whereas in the case of Afghanistan, the opposition was throughout the country. So it's a much different situation.
Yeah, I also think that the American public was clearly, at least in terms of what I've heard, some 70+% in favor of getting out. I don't recall, and you correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I don't recall that there was that sense about Korea.
Once there was an armistice, and the shooting stopped, except for a few incidents that occur from time to time, there was no pressure to get out because there were no mass U.S. casualties. And the fact is, in Afghanistan, there were no U.S. casualties for over a year.
I think the partition is the key that Michael said. You look at Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, or Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, or North and South Korea, when territorial division is equal to who controls, then you know, a standoff is possible, otherwise known as peace. But when, like in Vietnam or Afghanistan, it's the whole people that are divided everywhere. You know, it is logistically totally different.
Well, Vietnam had a north and a south. It looked like it was territorial integrity, and
Well, except that there was not any uniformity in the South. The Viet Cong were very active in the South, and the government's control was a lot different from the Korean. The government and the economy were a lot different from Korea.
By the way, the
yeah,
India-Pakistan example, it wasn't clear cut, and it led to 1 million deaths because the partition, you know, on both sides of the partition, there were divided communities. So
Right.
it has to be really clear cut for there not to be massive deaths.
Well, you can also look at the division of Germany after World War II. I mean, there was, you know, there was an occupier on one side of the wall and an occupier on the other side, or three occupiers on the other side.
Right.
But I also think in all of these things, for my sins, I studied social and economic history, and one of the things you learn when you study that is how the uneven pace of development in the world led to engagement between mainly Britain and those parts of the world, when those parts of the world were very poor, and they kind of got frozen in time by their engagement with the markets of the world. So, you know, Afghanistan became the poppy seller, you know, the Caribbean became the coffee bean seller, the sugar, bananas. So basically the history of the world froze in time. And when you freeze a place in time, you tend to freeze the belief systems as well.
One of the
Wait a
things
minute, why are you saying it froze in time?
Well, because their economy became a single supplier to a more industrialized UK at that time. So they never got to diversify, unlike, say, South Korea, where
You know, I have to just jump in there and say you have the politest way of walking right around British imperialism.
well, it is
about
British
diplomacy.
Well, I'm talking about the economic impact, not the intent. The intent, if we talked about the intent, you'd have to talk about the Amritsar massacre and all that stuff. But I'm just talking about the economic impact of imperialism was to turn economies into suppliers, and that's all they did because there was a lot of money in doing it. And so they never developed.
Well, that's almost true. You know, I can point to the textile industry in India being superior to Britain's textile industry for a long time.
And then destroyed.
And British had to destroy it in order to take over the market.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes all kinds of forms. I mean, India became spices.
You know,
And
it's
opium.
interesting, but
And
opium,
opium.
and it's, look, the same could be said about Colombia and cocaine. I think you know, it's such a simple idea to say that can't we learn from our mistakes? Just look at history, learn from the mistakes of history, and move forward. I think that it's pretty clear that nobody ever does.
Well, you can't, you know, the problem with history is you can't change it. It's done. So the lessons almost don't matter in that you've entrenched various things in societies. And the only way forward, you know, Korea actually shows the way forward, as does Japan a little bit, which is you have to totally separate yourself from the world economy and diversify using things like exchange controls and import-export controls. Otherwise, you will be a single crop supplier to the rest of the world forever.
Well,
Well, there's another factor in this as well. We talk about countries as though they're monoliths, and they never are monoliths. There are factions within countries, there are classes within countries, there are owners, and there are landowners whose interests are served by one sort of economy, and part of the deal is not just between the imperialist countries and their captives, but also within the captives, who has the power and what will they do to maintain their power?
Yeah.
You know, you go back as far as Adam Smith and then some, and take a look at every instance of, say, India or Afghanistan or Mexico or South America, whatever you want. The more capitalist country won. What we're seeing this week is I think a culmination of the great lie, not the big lie, the great lie of capitalism, that we are all we're powerless to do anything about, because we're all children of capitalism, and we need its benefits.
I'm curious though, Steve, to go back to your initial question, what everyone's sort of one or two word answer is. What will be remembered most about this?
Well, hopefully this isn't going to be remembered as a massacre of, a culture.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think it's not easy to see how that is going to be accomplished. But I made a joke about talking about Twitter, but the impact of these communications, social communications technologies, is already felt in this event. And I suspect that it's going to continue to be felt in ways that we aren't quite understanding yet. And the way I would pivot from this particular subject, which unfortunately I think we can do absolutely nothing about, is to talk about what's going on with the pandemic, which I think also is impacted by, I think that the Biden administration is moving, if it hasn't already moved, to a communication strategy designed to lay the groundwork for what reality is going to look like in the next few months. Which
before we get into that,
kind of an answer. Hang on a second. It's kind of an answer to the issue of Afghanistan. What's it going to look like in the next few months? That's been Biden's public response to this. Is no. This is the decision we made is to disengage. And he's, there's going to be plenty of criticism about how and how effectively that was accomplished, but I think that it's unlikely that that we're going to get drawn back into this as a war.
Well, I agree with that, but I wanted to give my answer to Frank's question. I think how this will be remembered will depend on how this plays out over the next month and years. If you take a snapshot of the first 2 days at the Kabul airport, you had chaos. You had people falling out of airplanes. If you take the next 2 days, it seems more orderly. Now, will that order maintain? We don't know. Will the Taliban continue to be cooperative? We don't know. So I think what we will remember is what Steve just said, that this was a decisive moment to disengage, but how we remember that will depend on the future.
Yeah, it is too early, and it's may also be too early when it comes to COVID as well, especially given all of the spikes. I have a quick aside question, and can anyone tell me if the monoclonal drugs in America have been approved by the FDA?
They're still an emergency use authorization.
So here in the UK,
they're also available for free. They're not. There's a Washington Post story today about that. They are approved for use on an emergency basis. They're free. The government has purchased them and made them available, but people aren't using them very much.
Yeah, and didn't the governor of Florida open up a facility to just for that in Florida?
Yes, he did, and the manufacturer of Regeneron is one of his biggest contributors.
Because here in the UK they just approved the sort of the UK's version of the FDA has approved their version of that drug today.
I would like to say something about the monoclonal antibody drug. So I have a family member who opted for that when she got COVID, and it was a really difficult task to actually get it. You have to take it within a certain amount of time, and the hoops that you have to jump through, you have to get, there's a ton of paperwork. The doctor was so overwhelmed with like pages and pages and pages of crazy amount of paperwork. And then it had to get approval. And it seemed like she was even going to miss the window for it. And maybe even did miss the window for it to be effective. She actually got it. But so, yeah, it's free. Yeah, it's there. But at least in our family experience, was not easy to enact that, to get it. And I wonder what's going on with it now.
So, Denis, can you talk about what I have this image of there needing to be sort of a three-pronged approach, that is vaccines, prophylaxis, and then drugs that will fight it. So it's not a single approach towards getting to whatever kind of position we're going to be in, whether it means it's going to be like the flu and every year we're going to have to take booster shots. Do you see any, do you see that, or do you see something different?
Well, there's several questions embedded there. Let me see if I can tease them apart. What's needed to safeguard the country is plan A, everybody gets vaccinated in a short amount of time so that the virus doesn't have a chance to evolve and mutate and provide you with a delta, epsilon, theta, whatever variant. Now, if that's not possible for psychosomatic reasons, then you got to go to plan B. What's plan B going to be? It's vaccinating as many people as you can. It's offering monoclonal antibody in a way that you should be able to dispense without having to write an encyclopedia, as Tina discovered. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to have a lot of dead people.
I mean, it seems to me that if you're not going to take the vaccine, why would you use the monoclonal?
Well, people have different belief systems. That
Well, the protocol.
So
the
when you're
protocol
healthy,
is that
I think when
based-
you're healthy, your calculus is different from when you are sick.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, well, you can't take the vaccine when you're sick. You have to wait until after you've resolved. But the protocol for monoclonal is you have to take it within a certain window after symptoms have presented. So they're two different. One's a treatment, and the other is a vaccine.
So the monoclonal will not work on people who are not showing symptoms but are positive?
No, it will.
Oh, no, it's before you get very sick. Its effectiveness is best after you've been diagnosed, but before you get very sick. So it's usually within 10 days of testing positive.
Right. Basically, it's a numbers game. If you get a single shot, a monoclonal antibody, whether you get it IV or IM, you're only getting a certain amount. And if you have more virus than you have antibody, then the antibody is going to protect you a little bit. But when the antibody is used up, the virus is going to go on its merry way. So what you want to do is make sure that you get the monoclonal antibody at a time when your viral count is low. Delta virus, Delta variant seems to be much more prolific than the Alpha variant. So that time window is probably smaller.
Does anybody?
So I was going to ask a question. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I was watching MSNBC 2 days ago, and there was a conversation that implied that the effectiveness of the vaccines after 6 months is as low as 40%, and that there are now a growing number of breakthrough
can't hear you.
infections.
I can hear.
I hear him.
I can hear him.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Yeah, Keith, you just went.
do you hear me now?
Yeah,
So I was saying that
6 months.
that after 6 months, the effectiveness of the vaccines is down to 40% from 90-something%, and that there are up to 20% of hospitalizations now are vaccinated people. Is that true, or was this like a one-off conversation from some weirdos?
No,
It
it
might
seems to be. It seems no. It's what Dr. Fauci has been saying. In a sense, the original regimen of one dose and then another dose 3 or 4 weeks afterwards are probably too closely spaced, but they did it because of the emergency, and that they originally knew that they would need booster shots. What you heard is what I'm hearing repeatedly and consistently from the people who know what's going on.
So there is no conspiracy involved in the fact that so many Republican congressmen and women have had breakthrough.
Well, there's also been a Democrat who's had a breakthrough. Hickenlooper's had a breakthrough.
It's actually more complex. It's more complex than you understand. The stuff in the news right now is only looking at circulating antibody titer. Basically, you take a blood sample and you spin it down, get the plasma or get the serum, and you react the serum with a known quantity of antigen and see what happens. And over time, that goes down, but that's always the way it works. That is the way your immune system is designed. Because if you build an antibody to rid your system of an antigen, once that's gone, your body doesn't need that circulating antigen or antibody, and your titer goes down. If you get reinfected in the window of a few months after you get your inoculation, antibody can come back pretty quickly. Long term, there's something called immunological memory. And frankly, we don't know how immunological memory is treated by COVID, for the simple reason that we haven't been able to go out a couple of years after somebody got inoculated or got sick. So what the government seems to be doing is saying, we're not taking any chances. We're just going to revaccinate people and keep the titer going up. But in point of fact, just like you get one smallpox vaccine, or once you have measles, you don't get it again. Your body has memory of the infection and can come back and make antibodies all over again real quickly. When I was in school, back in the Second Punic War, we had patients who still had very small traces of antibody to the 1918 Spanish flu circulating in their bodies. And that's the way it works. You get this shadow titer, and if your body ever needs it again, you have B cells and T cells that are lurking in your tissues that will come back out and proliferate very quickly.
There's something else to remember. This is all so new that in the testing protocols, there wasn't an opportunity to test various intervals and find the optimal intervals for giving vaccines. They had to get it done very quickly. So they started with close intervals. As we get more experience, we're learning more, and the booster shots seem to be the thing that we're going to be dealing with going forward.
Yeah, the number here between the time you got your second vaccine and the booster shot is 8 months. And I think they're saying 6 months in the United States.
No, I think it's also 8. Because
Whatever happened to the plasma therapy? Did that develop into the monoclonal therapy?
They're basically competing, and there was a lot of plasma, recovering plasma used, but once monoclonal antibody had an EUA, it did make a lot of sense, because it's a fair amount of work to get antibody out of a person and into a little vial that you can stick into another person.
Mm.
Well, one thing that I think we can safely assume is that over time, this will become a yearly inoculation. I just think that I don't see any indication that that's not going to happen. Basically, the flu model, hopefully much more efficacious, is that the word, than flu vaccines, which seem to be hit or miss in terms of the actual dominant strain that's out there at the time.
Don't bet on
I think
it.
that's one of the issues with the flu, is that the vaccine changes each year as the dominant strain changes. We haven't done that yet with COVID.
Oh, we have.
The variant, we've got one big one right now.
Well, Epsilon is down in South America. That's a pretty big one. We've got Delta. I don't know what else is out there.
Lambda.
No, I know the virus is mutating. I don't know if we've had new vaccines. We're still using the same vaccine, aren't we?
Right.
Yeah. Are we doing that?
That's why we're calling it a booster, but it's not necessarily going to be a booster in the future. It's going to be probably a more targeted at a variety of variants that have surfaced in the past year.
Is one of the issues.
I was a little bit pessimistic about the variants until this week. I read something that was a paper about the history of viruses morphing into new variants, and apparently almost always they commit hara-kiri. In other words, it's very rare for a virus to become more and more dangerous. It's more like a bell curve. I don't know why that would be, but
well, why that is because the variants are random. They're not purposeful variants. They're selected if they happen to be better at transmission. But then at some point, if they're really good, they use up their targets.
Well, I can tell you from an evolutionary perspective that a virus doesn't want to kill its host. A virus wants to be commensal with the host. It needs a place to live. About 8% of your genome, the DNA in every one of your cells, is actually ancient virus DNA. The way a virus finally commits hara-kiri is that it gets its DNA incorporated into its host chromosomes, such that when the cells divide, they take the viral DNA with them. The viral DNA has been completely inactivated. The virus basically gets what it quote unquote wants out of its lifespan by becoming immortal, by having its DNA become immortal. It does.
What's the time span? What's the time span for that to happen?
Depends on the virus and how sick it makes people, and it could be thousands of years.
I don't think I have that much time.
No, I don't think it matters. What you're saying is basically the virus is the remora on the shark that never lets go.
Yeah.
Well,
If I knew what remora is.
That would be Drake Remora. He was a doctor and nobody got that joke.
No,
Drake
still
Remora.
not. Still
that
not.
Was that was
still not
Joey.
right.
Joey in Friends. He played Drake Remore.
Oh, wow.
Oh, whoa.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
dude.
Thanks for
Sorry,
the free.
And by the way, Harry Carey, I had a baseball joke for that, Brent.
Yeah, thank God for
Yeah,
that.
but
This.
I
It
can't go
sounds-
for
sounds like,
any Friends jokes. Sorry, no
Oh,
Friends
man.
references.
Wow. Hey,
Haven't
what's the
watched
matter?
it.
Too woke for you?
Hey,
Oh, no.
It sounds like a
Frank?
I'm sorry.
micropart.
I'm sorry. I take it back. I apologize.
It sounds
do.
like a micropart of your genitalia. Oh, my remora is
Oh.
itching.
well, we've got
Yeah.
so
Boom.
Keith is trying to get that Jeopardy job.
Yeah. How about that?
Hey, it's open.
Still,
Jeez.
So what's the deal there? Tina squeegeed it onto the list. What does it say? Mike Richards steps down. And
Yeah,
what
but he's
about
still
LeVar
the-
Burton?
He'd be great, and they're going to go back to doing stars, guest stars. But he remains as the executive producer of the program. Personally, if I were his boss, I would replace him as the executive producer as well. It just seems to me, if he's going to step down as the host, he ought to step down as the executive producer. If, in fact, he was the one who said, "Hey, I'm hiring you." We went through this last week. It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway,
this is what happens when decade-old podcasts come home to roost. So, what are you going to say to your boss about this one, Frank? In the future,
what did I say something that would
No.
that would matter? Oh, see,
Well,
first of all, I will not have another boss for as long as I'm alive. which means that I will say whatever the hell I want to say whenever I want to say it, unless you tell me I can't, which is all right because
and
it is
even
your
then
show.
you will say it.
But it is your show, and I try to remain some kind of. I want to be conscious of your feelings and our audience. I don't want to push them away from us. I want to draw them in.
With what mechanism?
Intelligence, wit, charm,
Bribes.
No,
bribes.
Frank,
Yeah.
Frank, you should use your remora.
Yeah, my remote.
Oh.
By the way, that's what she said. No, hey, here's one. I got one. Did you guys hear that the Academy of Country Music Awards are now going to be airing on Amazon? I think that's an important thing because I think that the conventional wisdom had been saying all along that that what was going to be the safe haven for broadcasting would be live events, sports, and news. And I think that what we're seeing now is that game isn't that dog don't hunt anymore. And I really see that that this
Did it
stream
hunt
is
before? It didn't
Well,
really
I-
hunt before. We don't care. We didn't care about who broadcast it. We just want to see it.
Well, I think that's the secret to what will be the success of streaming. And we've said this a few times before, and that is that you just don't care where you get it from as long as you get it.
And they do a
this-
good job of showcasing it.
Yeah. And the stream is very good at all of that. I mean, it's not like you're going to have 1,000 channels on your TV, but you do have 1,000 channels or 10,000 channels or 50,000 or 100,000 channels in the stream. You can have as many streams as you can imagine. Look,
So-
even El Rey, which is the Robert Rodriguez network, has now made a 100% deal with Roku. So if you want to watch want to get your daily fix of Chopsaki movies, you're going to get them on El Rey, but you're only going to get them through a Roku. So I think that there is a clearly movement it's easy for me to say, and I said it 10 years ago maybe, that TV was dead. Well, it wasn't dead then, but it's dying.
Isn't it just reorganizing into different, a different combination of
Yeah,
three or four?
Yes, of course
channels?
it is. Yeah, but it's
Okay,
not as sexy as saying TV is dead.
So this is Frank's version of Steve's Office is Dead.
Yeah, but I was right about that.
Well, Frank is also right. I mean,
Well, Frank, when you say,
I've told you about my friend Hardy Tankersley, who predicted this a decade ago when he was working for Fox, and they said, yeah, we all know that. Just don't bother us now. We're still making money.
Yeah, you're that's exactly about the same time that NBC decided that they needed to get into digital, and we had this gigantic meeting in California with all the executives in one huge room with the doors closed, and nobody was allowed to have their phone on them, so that we could talk about what digital was going to be and what it was going to do and how were we going to use it and what we were going to make of it. And in the end, everybody walked out of there saying, we don't understand anything about this, but I'll tell you, we know we need to be there. And I think a lot of it started that way.
And the same thing happened in the record industry.
Yeah.
I mean, people knew it was dead, but they were still making money. So you just grind as much out of it as you can until
they tried to kill Napster. Which, if the music industry had co-opted Napster instead of trying to kill it, I think it might have been better off for that.
That was Metallica that really wanted to kill that.
Yeah.
I heard the Metallica version of Whiskey in the Jar yesterday.
Tina, you keep trying to say something and you don't get
that's
there.
okay. That's okay. I'm just waiting for it. I'm waiting for that place to.
Yeah.
She wants to do her own sneak peek. She wants to be on screen then create her own sneak peek.
No, I would never do that, Brent.
That would be a great feat. That would be awesome.
Steve will do it for you, though.
Frank, when you say
Right.
when you predicted that television is dead way back when and still are predicting it now, are you really saying that network TV is dead? Is that what you really mean?
I'm more saying that broadcast television has lost its charm, as opposed to television is dead. I mentioned this a long time ago. I taught a class at the Savannah College of Arts and Design, and at the beginning of the semester, great school, absolutely fantastic school. I was teaching a TV course, and at the beginning of the semester, I put a challenge out to everyone that was within earshot. To try and come up with another name for television, because I felt that, television was dead. And in the end, literally at the end of the year, there was no answer. It's still television. Even if it's coming off of a stream, even if you're getting it from, even if you're broadcasting it from your phone through a Chromecast onto a larger screen, it's still television. It's like in the movies, in the movie theaters, it's still a movie, whether it's film or not.
It kind of reminds me of the phone also. I mean, I've been saying, let's come up with another name for a cell phone, because it's so much more than a phone. The very little, actual talking do we do on it.
What's more interesting, I think, is what doesn't change. So what doesn't change is, there's shows, movies, news, sport, documentaries. So what doesn't change is the stuff we make. TikTok maybe adds something to that list. Shorts, are now a thing. And within shorts, there's genres of shorts. There's educational, there's humor, blah, blah. And there's things like what's that fans only thing?
OnlyFans.
Just OnlyFans.
So there's a small number of new genres that are some of which are not that new. So mostly humans are still wanting the same stuff. So the only thing that's changing is how do we get it, and what is the business model around that?
It's interesting that you say that, Keith. I just struck recently by watching a number. I would put television commercials in that thought process as well. I mean, think about where TikTok, I believe, it evolved from Vine, which we all felt really bad about when it went away. But I've been noticing more and more TikTok influence in television commercials recently. I don't know if it's what it's like there, but it's really a big deal here. Now, I have to admit, I will sit with every morning and flip through cat videos. and start laughing wildly with my wife sitting next to me going, "What are you laughing at?" And I'll stick a cat in her face. But I see stuff that I see production techniques, the way that things are done on TikTok starting to creep into television programs as well as commercials. And so that's part of what's going on now. It's all feeding off of each other and creating something new, which I think is a very positive thing. I'm not sure, other than I stole this game show format and tweaked it a little bit. Has there been as much thought process going into changing the medium by using all these things that are out there available to it now? I think I feel that more of that's happening now than has happened in the past.
Well, it's happening because there are more formats and styles available to steal from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost the same. It's almost the same conversation to be had about why are we more interested in certain types of entertainment or certain types of sports or even politics or anything. Why are we more interested? Why does it seem there's more interest in sort of everything that's coming through our video content provider than we ever have before? And that's because of what you just said, Michael. There's just more of it.
There's more of it and more variety. And also I saw an interesting report on the fact that these electronic stimuli raise endorphins. They're an addiction now, in a way that sitting down for a half hour or an hour television show is not addicting. It's more environmental, but when you go flipping through your cat videos, every time you see a new cat, you get a new hit.
Yeah, but it's like the vaccines. Eventually that kind of wears off. Man,
I don't know.
For me,
I don't know.
Okay, great. Let me know when you're done saying what I didn't say.
Okay,
of course it wears off, and people will always be trying.
After a while, I don't go to Facebook very much anymore because I get sucked into this vortex of slightly algorithmically tuned bullshit.
Well,
I don't go to. I can see getting. If I was my daughter, I think she's a TikTok person. She was definitely a Vine person.
no, she's not. She doesn't like TikTok.
She doesn't like it.
Mm.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that I think that people get a certain kind of, what's the term? Ad blindness about these different kind of social constructs.
I think there's a voyeuristic element to TikTok that makes it extremely addictive. It's almost like there is no end to the number of different people you could watch doing shit. If you know,
well, there is. You have to go to work at some point. You have to get. You have to get out of
the
that.
great thing about TikTok is you can sneak it in at work.
That's right.
Well, if it boosts your productivity, then more power to them.
There's not a lot of time investment. They're really short, and you can get a little quick fix and put it away in your pocket for a while, and then take it out again.
Yeah, but if you start doing it, an hour later, you realize you've been doing it for an hour.
It's just like the Remore.
Nice try, kid. Whatever
your name is.
Right.
And Steve, I think just because that you can avoid it, and you say,
no,
hey,
I didn't say I can avoid it.
But you say, hey,
I want to avoid
it. I'm talking.
Hey, welcome to our house.
This is what it's like to live here.
May I suggest reading?
Can I make a
Take out
sneak
book
peek out
and
of
read
that?
it?
But
I listened to it, Michael. I'm actually right in the middle of Phil Rucker's book,
Tina,
which is
back to Tina.
That's right, Tina.
You're all interrupting Tina.
Yeah.
Go.
Keith, I'm going to block you if you don't watch out.
See,
I'm so afraid of you. You remember that?
This is what happens, and
Leary.
then the focus comes back to me, and then what I have to say isn't so illuminating. But that too. But my point is, Steve, is that, you can say, oh, when I go to Facebook, I get sucked in, so I know I better stay away from it. And over the years, you've become pretty good at, ferreting out your addictions and your weaknesses, and then and being able to have tools to deal with them, which is like avoidance. But not everybody can do that. Not everyone is really good at that.
Well, that plays to what Keith was saying. There is addiction. It is an addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people are getting better at recognizing the signs. I mean, there are a lot of things that I used to do that I don't ever do anymore.
You just reminded me of a story. So back in 1995, when I was one of the founders of Siberia Cafe, which was the first internet cafe in the world, the Daily Telegraph called us and said, we want to do a story about internet addiction. And we didn't think there was any internet addiction, but we decided we wanted the publicity. So we got one of the hosts in the cafe to self-describe herself as an addict. And we gave her the name Annette, first word Annette, second name Head, Annette Head. And so they came to interview Annette Head, and they did a whole page on her addiction without realizing it was a setup.
I'll tell you something. Back in 1980, 79, something like that, I think my first addiction was playing endless hours of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text version with green text on a black screen.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to anything else I was doing at 4:00 in the morning.
No, text version, as opposed to.
Oh, there was no video. There was no imagery. It was only text, and it was a crazy game that eventually developed into a game that had video. It was kind of like the earliest version of Sim City, which has now become something quite astounding. There's even a language. There's even pop singers doing, I think it's called Simlish. And it's insane, but it's also addictive.
Okay, well,
I think I'd rather be addicted to that than heroin.
There you go.
Have you had to make that choice? I don't think so.
Well, I watched this show, The White Lotus. I don't know how many of you have seen it yet on HBO.
Spoiler alert.
I haven't heard about it.
I think addiction is just the word that gets used for something awesome that you want to engage with. You know what I mean? It's not a bad thing. It's like fulfilling some human need.
Yeah.
TikTok is kind of therapeutic in a way. So, okay, you might be addicted to it, but that's because it's doing something that you like.
Yeah. I think you're
All
right.
right. So let me
endorse White Lotus. Excellent.
And I want to endorse hit and run.
Yeah, that was good right up until the
Until they ran.
I'm on the last episode. I'm like literally. When we're done tonight, I'm going to go watch and everyone has said to me what you're thinking right now, Steve.
I'm not thinking it. I saw it.
It's depressing if that's true.
Yes. No, it's not true.
I don't know what it is. What is
Brent
it?
has to leave.
10 minutes.
At 2:50. Yeah.
Okay.
What
all
is
right.
it?
Here are a couple of data points that are semi-related. The most interesting one is the Tesla bot, the humanoid robot.
Wasn't it that a guy in a suit with a helmet
Probably.
at the event? Yeah.
I mean, Windows 3.0 was a guy behind a curtain with a wire.
The great Oz.
What?
Pay no attention to that guy, though.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing I think is interesting about the Tesla robot or bot is that this might be a way for solving the problem that nobody really wants to go back to the office. You just send the bot.
Steve, I think you should, I think you should go back though and talk about what it is, because I think.
Well, you go ahead. It was your thing.
Well, Musk
Come back on
announced
screen. There we are.
that there was in the works a Tesla bot humanoid like
Robot.
5 feet 8 inches tall, 125 pounds, a screen for a face, and that they were developing it to do
Menial tasks.
menial tasks, dangerous tasks, repetitive tasks, boring tasks. So
I combine that with the, you see pretty much on a daily basis now, you see companies that were going to return to the office, delaying it by a month,
3 months,
et cetera. So it seems like there's some sort of, the work from anywhere environment, if it got built out around humanoid robots, that might solve, 2 problems with 1 stone.
I'm not sure why it needs to be humanoid. I mean, I can remember 15 years ago seeing a telepresence robot, which was basically a motorized wheeled base with a stalk and a screen and a camera and a microphone. And it could, you could send it into a place and show up. And it would be your avatar. It could go from desk to desk in an office, but it didn't have to look humanoid.
They did that on. They did
Wheels at
that
the
on.
bottom and
Mike
a screen at the
Harrington
top.
had one in the TechCrunch
Yeah.
office. He
They
used to
did that
send
on
it-
Big Bang Theory too.
I mean, why does it want to be humanoid? That's what I want to understand.
that is, I think that's a good question. I think, if it's designed to handle menial tasks and dangerous things, why do you even want it to look human?
We already have that. People have little robots that clean their carpets and their floors. They don't look like people. They just look like discs.
Right.
Well, you
Boxes.
certainly have robots that are building cars that look like arms.
They look
But
like
what-
arms. They
what-
don't look like arms and legs and faces.
That's true.
But what Musk is really good at is taking existing technology. I think Apple has always been good at this as well. It's taking existing technology that already exists in disparate parts, like AI, robotics. In the case of Apple, it's often it's things like when it did the mouse. It already existed, but no one had yet productized it and brought it together into the whole thing. It's what I've called on the show before the unborn child, where all the elements of life exist, but no one's put them together yet and actually created the thing. He's really good at that. I mean, everything he needed for the original Tesla car already existed. Everything he needed to build the Starship already existed, but no one had put it all together. So he kind of jumps ahead maybe 5 years and already puts together the bits that he can into something that will be real within that kind of time frame. And it's an appetite for risk, but it's also creative imagination, but it isn't invention. It is not invention. So the deep science is done already by somebody else. And you see that with the robots, those ones that Google invested in Boston, where they're Boston Dynamics, where they've got the dogs doing backflips and stuff.
Keith,
I
can
still
agree
haven't
with
heard the
everything
answer
you
to why
said.
it needs to be
Can I
humanoid.
just answer, Keith? Can I just answer, Keith?
I don't know. Can you?
I can agree with everything you said, but I would make a distinction between primary research and development, which is science-based, and what you're talking about, which is applied research and development, which is engineering-based.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I would add one other element to it. It's also marketing based.
Yeah.
So when you define a product that makes people eager to have it, you're not only doing the engineering and the basic science, you're also doing some human engineering and marketing.
Yeah, which is why I suggest that there might be a subtle relationship between the concern that people have about how we're going to escape from this pandemic and such things. That might drive more adoption of solutions. I mean, I know that when we started to realize that we weren't going to restaurants anymore, then we started to pay attention to, companies like there was a restaurant in Daly City that has a protocol where you order online or on the phone, and you get there, and when you get there, you push the button on your trunk of your car, and they put the bag in the trunk. It's completely touchless, and that kind of thing, as it expands throughout the culture, is, I think, a really big deal. These are
Zuckerberg did his own version of this. He's using AR to say that it'll give you the feeling you're sitting in a room at a conference table with a bunch of other people. And I'm remembering back to my own time working for corporations. That was the worst part of work. Sitting in a room with a conference,
wasn't there something
table with other people.
What was that? What was that thing? Another world, a true. What was that?
Metaverse.
There was
Second Life. Second Life.
Yeah, Second Life.
Yeah, Second Life.
It was, when I read the story about what Facebook was doing with the virtual conference rooms, it felt like deja vu to me. But if you think about what Steve is saying, put together the idea of these bots that will do the boring work and this virtual conference room, and you start to get a picture, I think, of why would you go back to work? By the way, CBS just sold BlackRock, which I find to be very interesting. Yes,
that building had the CBS recording studios where Dylan and Miles and all those people actually recorded there.
And it was the house,
and they're going to keep it for. They have a lease on it for an extended period of time in order to keep those studios and other elements of the CBS, Paramount Plus network alive. Listen, we got Brent having to drop. So last thoughts, Brent?
Yeah, I'm going to save them for next week.
Can I use that, Brent?
Feel free. NFT it if you want.
Thanks, babe.
All right, guys. See you next week.
With those photographs you were taking.
Well, I was trying to get it when you were talking, Tina. No, it was great. You were talking, and on one of my screens, while you were talking, Steve was looking at you, but because he was looking at you directly, he was turned in his square to look like he's looking directly at me while you were talking. And I was trying to get that. And then I had this other screen where it has a completely different box setup.
So
when
I
get that,
I'm going to get my humanoid robot to look in the right direction.
So when the humanoid robot is actually your avatar in that VR conference situation in the building that CBS sold, there you go. It's all together.
Yeah.
And there I go as well.
And a hard-boiled egg.
Brent, thank you so much.
Hard-boiled eggs.
Take it easy,
Hey,
Brent.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
we'll
Brent.
catch your next show.
That's not hard.
No, Brent's on a roll. He's had a bunch of really interesting shows in just the past few days, as a matter of fact. None of which I've seen because I haven't got time.
There you go.
But I did read the transcript. Okay, Denis, any thoughts?
Thoughts?
No, I just said thoughts.
Oh, this is not the wrap up?
Should be.
Should
Well-
be. Well,
Well,
I just put
that's the
something-
producer, I guess.
I just put something in the chat a couple of seconds ago for something Keith and I have been talking about. Fixing climate change is not that hard because all of the primary science is done. It's applied R&D that needs to happen next. And we're slowly beginning to see that happen.
It seems like a lot, not just because of what's going on the climate, but it seems like there's just so much more interest in sustainability and climate, unless I'm just more attuned to it because of you, Denis. It just seems like there's more of it out there.
Well, because there are more fires, more
Yeah,
storms,
exactly.
more earthquakes. The more the planet seems to be killing us, the more interested we are in stopping that.
Chris Sacca just, he's the guy that used to work at Google and then became famous for investing in various decacorns that became big. He's just raised a fund after not investing actively for a few years. This week he announced an $800 million fund just focused on climate change.
Wow.
A lot of money to be made right there.
Yeah, kudos.
And
Well,
what
we're-
disappoints me is all these carbon offset startups where it seems like carbon offset is not a way to fix climate change, but it is a way to channel money to some good things. But carbon offset is kind of cheating to me. It's like you're a bad actor, so you pay some money to buy carbon offsets so you can keep being a bad actor. It's like being hooked on crack, you know?
It's part of the grifting of the green.
The grifting of the green. That sounds like a book title.
Oh, it does.
I'm working on it.
Oh, man, I like that.
So I want to talk about Twitter Spaces API for a second. There, I did it.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Excellent.
What about it, Steve?
That's what I wanted to talk about.
No, it means that Twitter is once again, if you read the release and you understand the history of Twitter, Twitter has these moments where it says to developers, hey, use this and build stuff on it. And one of the things they specifically ask developers to build is discovery tools in this particular release, which Steve has been saying for a long time is one of the missing parts of Spaces. So Twitter's basically opening up its APIs to developers to build on top of Spaces, all the stuff that it can't build itself. Historically, when that happens, Twitter learns from it and then closes the API down and pisses off all the developers. So
that hasn't really been the history of it since Jack Dorsey solidified his position as head of the company. What that is just one of the things that Twitter has accomplished in recent weeks. Another, as you just pointed out, was the Spaces integration into the Twitter client, which is proceeding apace. I've become a big fan of Kara Swisher and her podcast, or whatever it's called, Spaces Cast. She works with a Substack author, Casey
Newton.
Yeah, who's sort of holds down the the creator desk, if you will. Kara has she's becoming a sort of an independent, highly associated with the New York Times, and as such, the New York Times has now taken most of their newsletters, which they proliferated over the last 6 months, behind their paywall, which is interesting because those of us who read the Gillmor Gang Telegram feed and click on a post from Denis Pombriant occasionally, we overrun our free allotments, I guess is the word, of pages, and we're inevitably forced into their subscription environment. They've become massively successful. I believe between them and the Wall Street Journal, which preceded them in this strategy, they've become the two national networks in the subscription economy. So there's something going on here that I find compelling. The noise and the excitement about Clubhouse seems to now being transcended by what Twitter is doing in terms of marketing and creating a flow of information. I also noticed something that was quite odd, which I imagine is part of the coding of there's the speakers, there's the host in the upper left-hand corner, and then there are the speakers who have been invited and authorized to be in the room or with the space. And then there's this, a picture of me as a listener. Now, I don't think that this, I think this is a personalization that they're doing. And I wasn't sure about it until I saw the guy to my immediate right was Dan Farber. So I think what they're doing is they're sniffing my Twitter cloud, people that I follow and have interactions with over time. And they're putting them in a place where you can then click on the image and DM somebody directly. So there's this is what, Clubhouse has been doing with their sort of roll your own DM strategy over the past month.
Steve, I don't know if you noticed that there was a controversy this week around what you could think of as a pivot in Twitter that goes back more than a year, that this is all the end result of. And I agree with you that Twitter is easily the most interesting platform right now in terms of its ability to deliver features and work on stuff that's relevant to where the world feels like it's going. But the controversy was that Jack Dorsey apparently laid down the law and he hired some guy whose job was to, quote, clean house. That is to say, get rid of anybody that was not being sufficiently focused, innovating, blah, 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 blah. And this guy rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. That was kind of his job. And he had to apologize this week for doing that because what you might think of as the kind of the woke Twitter employees ganged up on him. And so he had to apologize. So there's definitely been a conscious effort inside Twitter to move away from a kind of a coasting way of thinking to an active product building, innovation way of thinking that has led to some internal tensions.
And as Michael was suggesting before, something that delivers as much marketing strategy as development strategy or creator strategy. This is a serious effort to up-level these technologies into something that actually works.
The other thing that happened yesterday is Adobe acquired Frame.io, which is the cloud-based collaborative editing tool that Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere users use. I think LumaFusion also plugs into Frame.io.
That made a lot of sense. I thought that made a lot of sense.
But it kind of shows you that.
What are they acquiring, Keith, in your opinion?
What Frame.io have done really, really well is something that's hard to do, which is create a cloud-based editing desk that can be used by multiple editors simultaneously without having to upload terabytes of files. They use what's called proxy files, and it cooperates with Final Cut or Adobe on the desktop. Doesn't replace it, but it makes collaborative editing possible. So it's mainly collaborative editing. The company I'm involved with, Millicast, does the same for live feeds. So they've built the ability to do live editing for live events from a cloud-based kind of switching desk and console. So, and I also noticed Restream this week. If we were doing this live on Restream, not through Zoom, you could invite all of us to be part of the show, and it would go out not just on your Twitter, but our Twitter as well. So basically it uses the social media streams of all the participants, not just one. So there's a lot going on in this.
So I can think of somebody who absolutely will not ever be on this show talking about feedback. And the other thing I think is going on with Frame.io is this is an acqui-hire. The model of bringing the person who figured out how to insert himself into another platform, bringing him into the platform and retaining his his people and his, insight into how to navigate. I think that's a significant part of this deal.
You also have to assume they're going to close down the Final Cut Pro integration to favor Premiere. I don't know if that is true. I'm just guessing.
Okay.
You have to talk to the editors about that.
Yeah. Well, what are you saying?
Well,
Do you-
I just,
Do you use
it's,
Premiere?
what's that?
Have you used Premiere?
I've used both.
Yeah. And which do you prefer?
Final Cut.
How come?
It's just intuitive to me. I actually, when I was a film editor, the first version of Avid was designed to use things the way you would think about them as a film editor.
Mhm.
And it progressed into the, what eventually became Final Cut. It looks and acts like Avid. And it's just a matter of having familiarity with it. But I do like the idea of the ability to have collaborative editing space on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm not so sure I want anybody messing with my cuts. Anyway.
Well, it depends what the project is. Some projects, different editors own different parts of it. That's what it's for, really.
Well, the idea that you could be working on something in one room that is a cut of something while the audio guy is taking the same thing that you're cutting on and working on sound design on that exact same thing, while a graphic designer is in another room creating graphic designs that will be incorporated into that edit that work with those sounds, that works for me.
Yeah.
And that's in fact what we do. Tina's production flow with the sneak peeks is, on LumaFusion or whatever it's actually called.
It is. You got it right for the first time ever.
So what's the company name?
Luma Touch, I think. Or...
We're all a little confused.
Yes.
About that, yeah.
Yes. Back into the realm of, I'm not sure.
Luma.
Yeah, but their approach to this is extremely effective, and we basically just bounce over AirPlay or AirDrop between our iPads.
I imagine that you're using AirPlay, right? Not AirDrop, or are you actually AirDropping?
I'm literally doing a compressed LumaFusion package. And dropping it on Tina's machine. She opens it when she clicks on it. It opens up automatically and becomes, it's a workflow on her. Yes, it would be possibly even better to save the space and be able to use a common store of data like Creative Cloud, which is the Premiere Pro version of this.
I can see this as a real great tool in the education system. I mean, the schools like SCAD or the one in Florida that escapes me right now, Full Sail, I think it's called. Those kinds of schools could really use a product like that.
Well, the other thing that's happening in that space is Final Cut, Resolve, and Premiere are all evolving quite fast. Actually, Final Cut's evolving the slowest of the three.
Yeah.
Premiere just introduced transcription, and it's very good. I know Steve's using it for the show now, and
Correct.
It's really, really good. The transcription.
So that's the one you're using, Steve. The Premiere version of that. Oh, okay.
And I have your kind of attitude about Final Cut going in, but I was somewhat able to reduce that when we started using LumaFusion or LumaTech or whatever it is, because it's so modular that it basically it allows me to use this as Apple starts to put much more horsepower into the MacBook Pro with M1. I've started to just move everything over to that.
Yeah.
And LumaFusion immediately produced an M1 version of this, which is well ahead of what Apple has done, I believe, with Final Cut. So,
Wasn't Premiere? It seems to me, maybe it's just my weak little brain. Wasn't Premiere the first or one of the earliest versions of the desktop editing systems that you could use without having to have a system like Avid to deal with? And then you still had to, in the early days, you had to conform your EDL as opposed to actually being able to spit out Final Cut video.
so this would normally not be a particularly interesting topic for the show, but in fact, now it's becoming the absolute center of this creator economy production environment. So and the fact that these things are snapping into each other, there's a way of compressing and going from LumaFusion to Final Cut. I would be surprised if they did that with Premiere, because I think Premiere Adobe is making moves to try and lock out the market, which is why I'm very glad that Apple has done what it has done with Final Cut and keeping it, keeping Adobe Premiere honest.
Well, and then of course they dropped Final Cut, their sort of Final Cut Lite, which was available up until I think about 2 years ago, and it's gone now. So,
but it's still only $300 for a lifetime license, and you get all the upgrades for free. It's pretty good.
Okay.
All right. So, Michael, any thoughts?
Yes, two thoughts. One is that both Final Cut and the Apple product, and the Macromedia product, Premiere, Final Cut and Premiere, all go back originally to the same engineer who started the grandfather of them all. And part of the problem was that he did one for Adobe and one for Macromedia. Then Macromedia acquired Adobe, and so Apple acquired the Macromedia version and turned it into Final Cut. So they are descendants of the same father.
So that was one thing. What was the other thing?
The other thing is completely orthogonal to everything we've been talking about, which is I just started reading the autobiography of Ulysses S. Grant, and it is wonderful. He is a great writer, very sly. He manages to sneak in disses that are not quite insulting, but pretty insulting, and very illuminating about the times that he grew up in.
Does it answer the question, who's buried in Grant's tomb?
No, but he
Does
wrote it.
Know the answer?
Pardon? I do know his wife, Mrs. Grant.
Have you gotten to the place yet where he where he says to let Ulysses S. Grant, to let Robert E. Lee go off and live his life?
I haven't got that. I'm still at the Mexican War, and he was his version of the Mexican War is something I never learned in school, which is that the territory of Texas, which was part of Mexico, was very sparsely populated, and they invited U.S. citizens to settle there. Mexico had prohibited slavery, but the Americans who moved into Texas were slavers, and the Mexican War was an attempt to increase the slave-owning territory of the United States, and Grant was thoroughly opposed to it. Nobody, when I learned about the Alamo and the Texans and acquiring Texas, nobody related it to slavery when I was in school.
No,
Well, think about this also. For roughly 20 years, from 1840 to 1860, you had the Mexican War. You also had the Trail of Tears, where a large number of Native Americans were forced off the land in the South to make more room for slavery. With all of the sunk costs involved by the Union in setting up the South, I have to imagine that was a peripheral cause of the Civil War. we're not letting you go because we paid too much already to make you.
Overall, Americans are pretty nasty.
Yeah.
He says from London.
Exactly. My home, my permanent home.
Your permanent home, the
Yeah.
former imperialist capital of the British Empire.
Exactly.
Okay, to wind things up, Tina, any thoughts?
I just saw on the corner of my eye, I can see the television a little bit earlier. Biden was delivering his thoughts about the Afghanistan pullout, and flanked on either side of him was Kamala Harris, and I think it was Blinken, and
Secretary of State.
yeah, and they were both masked. And I think we're about to see a lot more masks in our government. I think that they're trying to communicate the need for it again, and I think that we need that a lot. I think it's been really lacking what the government has been communicating. I think we should have a lot more messages, visual messages on TV, on radio, and whatever.
I agree, and I think we will be seeing them. I think you're right.
Yesterday,
Personally,
Thursday,
I just upgraded from 3-ply surgical masks to N95.
yeah, I'm sure there'll be a run on them.
Yeah.
Yesterday,
The interesting, the book, the Phil Rucker book, the section about what went on in the White House about masks is fascinating. It's really a good book. If you do have the time to either read it or listen to it, it's called "I Alone Can Fix This." So,
yesterday,
Don't neglect his co-writer, Carol Lennig.
Yeah, she's great.
Yesterday, 1 million new vaccinations occurred yesterday. So hopefully these messages are going to start communicating past the official ones. And, I'm going to pay attention to the dress code from now on.
Yeah. I've been calling them trickle-up mandates, and we've been seeing more and more of them in businesses and schools and universities and state governments. Even if the federal government does not put mandates in place for masks and vaccine, they're just proliferating throughout the country.
Neil Young dropped out of Farm Aid, at least the physical event, because he doesn't feel that he should be sending a message to his and other fans that it's safe yet.
VidCon canceled this morning. They had canceled last year's in-person conference and were planning to go in October, but they canceled.
I wonder if CES is
a friend of mine who is a Broadway drummer was in the West Side Story revival, and they canceled. They were going to reopen.
I can't imagine that CES is going to, although they're saying they're going to be open. I can't imagine that they will. It just seems in Las Vegas, 100,000 people. I just don't know.
Well, I think definitely we're going to see, if you don't have a vaccine card, you don't get in.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen at a very broad scale. Obviously, businesses, school boards.
I believe San Francisco, either today or tomorrow, has gone to most indoor situations. You have to present proof of vaccine or proof of a negative test for a whole lot of situations. Gyms, bars, restaurants, all kinds of not everything, but a lot of different indoor situations. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully,
in my own state, just yesterday, they announced new restrictions, and signs have gone up, starting Monday.
Jay Inslee.
What?
Jay Inslee.
Jay Inslee, Governor Inslee of Washington State.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the governor of Kentucky was very impressive on MSNBC earlier this week. So there are some people starting to pay attention to this. I think what's happening is that as we get closer to the midterms, people are starting to realize that this is going to be a political plus for them, and regardless of how it plays to the Republican primaries.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, I want to thank Brent Leary for his usual visual performance. And in the same vein, I want to thank, although he had quite a bit to say today about the vaccines and science, I'd like to thank Denis Pombriant.
Hey, can I say one thing?
I don't know.
I have an answer for Frank. What will 2021 be remembered like? And I think the answer is 1968.
Wow. Well, there's an awful lot of
What does that mean? I don't understand it.
A lot of comparisons to be made.
Yeah.
What happened in 1968 other than the whole world was watching?
What, did you forget?
Well, I know Bobby Kennedy was killed.
Well, a lot went down the drain, and the disposal was running.
Wow.
Funny,
By the
'cause
way,
I always think of- I always
news
think
just
of
broke that there was a manufacturer of rapid COVID tests
Yeah, I just
That,
saw that. Wow.
that laid off their staff and destroyed their stocks when there was a low incidence of infection, and
I'll
Yeah,
bet
they wish they
they're
hadn't.
sorry now. Yeah.
you bet.
Thanks to Frank Radice.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks to Keith Teare.
Thank you all. Nice to be
I
here.
remain terrified of you.
Yeah, and it's so obvious that every time I open my mouth, you look petrified.
Steve is just referencing some really shitty email.
Yeah.
Bring
you
cats, Dennis, bring your cats next time.
They're sleeping.
What's new?
It's a rough
Thanks,
life.
Mike. Thanks to Michael Markman.
I would like to say now what I should have said at the beginning, which is I apologize for my abrupt decision to cancel my appearance last week. I know it was unprofessional, but it was a medical emergency, and everyone's fine now.
You were, that's good. And you were there though. You were texting in and your stuff got used. So
I was tuned in in the waiting room. Yes.
Well, it was not unprofessional of you. The comment was that it was unprofessional of me and the producers, Tina and
To not
I,
make mention of
to
it.
not make mention of it. I felt that it would be unprofessional to talk about something that I really didn't know what was going on.
No, it came up at the last minute, and I didn't have time to tell you what was going on.
Yeah.
I just said I can't make the show.
Exactly.
And we're so glad you're back.
And we are thrilled. Thanks to yes, I think so. Thanks to our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me butt into the show.
Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's stop the live stream.
But that was good stuff there at the end.